So, healing isn't always smooth sailing. There are plenty of traps along the way that can slow you down or make you feel stuck. So, in this episode, we're uncovering the most common traps people fall into, like obsessing over quick fixes, maybe overreacting on their diet, or falling into the all or nothing mindset.
Healing doesn't have to be harder than it already is, so let's navigate the path with fewer detours.
Sounds juicy. So, yeah, biggest healing traps, eh?
So if we're talking about things that can derail you, detour you, really slow your progress on your healing journey, what would you say those sneaky traps maybe have been for you along the way?
Probably to feel like you're not making progress all the time. And I found, after speaking to so many people, that once they face a setback, then they just throw in the towel. But setbacks are all part of the journey, and we actually learn more from setbacks than we do plain sailing. So it's shifting the mindset so that it's not just about constantly winning and constantly feeling like you're progressing, but learning, hey, what did I do this day that set me back? Because whatever you did, whether that be nutritionally or psychologically or, working out or whatever, that's a lesson that you would have learned. So, yeah, I'd say probably not being consistent and giving up too soon.
You said the magic word, consistency. And this ties into our conversation that we had last week about failure and how you perceive failure, like you said, and whether you let that completely derail you or take it as a lesson. But I think a lot of people don't realize how far consistency can get you. How it's not about being perfect. It's not about showing up perfectly every day. It's not about even making steady progress every day, but just being consistent and understanding those beneficial habits to build in your life, and then staying consistent with those over a long period of time. I think that's one of the biggest traps to fall into.
Yes, because it's so hard to stay consistent when you don't feel like you're making progress. But it's the strength that you build in those moments that builds your resilience and then enables you to overcome hurdles when they happen, because life is always going to throw stress at you. It's not always going to be smooth sailing. So it's learning how to navigate those moments, which are really going to benefit you in terms of keeping you in a stable state, inflammation wise or mentally. Yeah, for sure, consistency is king.
Yeah, and as we discussed last week as well, coming from that perfectionist type mindset where you just expect to be good at things and you just expect to do things well or perfectly, I feel like consistency really is the opposite of perfectionism. So it for me, that learning that did not come naturally. I rejected it as much as possible, because I did definitely over the years fall victim to all or nothing behavior in many areas of my life. And that belief system just kind of bleeds into the healing journey very much so. So if you're running your life in that way, in that all or nothing mindset, and then you're approaching your health and your healing in that same way, I think that you're preparing for a rude awakening, because that's not how we get there to where we want to go.
I also think that when people expect to heal quicker than they think is also another trap, because I think people underestimate how long it takes to heal, depending on obviously the person and how long they've essentially been building up inflammation in their body for them to now be in a situation where they have possibly disease within themselves. Just really kind of appreciating how long it then takes to get to a stable point where they feel great. A lot of people underestimate that, and a lot of people underestimate what they can achieve in, say, 2 years, and overestimate what they can get done in 2 months. So I think setting expectations as well with yourself when it comes to how long this is going to take, because essentially healing is the lifetime endeavor. You're always going to be hopefully shooting for disease prevention. So you can class that as a lifetime healing journey if you want to, and I certainly do. But just because you feel sick and you feel poorly doesn't mean that you're then shooting for just feeling okay. You know, you should be shooting for thriving and feeling optimal and looking after yourself so that you don't get stuck in the same position of being poorly.
Yeah. And I very much agree. And I think that outlook that you just described of accepting that the healing journey is a lifelong endeavor, accepting that our personal growth journey is a lifelong endeavor, for me, that was really what helped flick the switch from that all or nothing behavior to where I am now. When I finally accepted that, figured that out, it was like a huge weight had just been lifted from my shoulders, because there wasn't that same kind of desperation energy or rushing mentality to get things right, to heal, to be perfect. It was just an acceptance of, this is life. It takes time. It happens in stages. And I meant it for the long haul. And I really started applying that to everything in my life, to my relationships, to my business, to my relationship with exercise and my relationship with food. And it just took all the pressure off for me. It was like, this is what I do because this is what I do. These are the choices I make because I know they're good for me. And they don't have to be perfect. I don't know. It just relieved so much stress for me.
Yeah. And we could also bunch this into like this whole marketing ploy of going on a detox or a cleanse or whatever they're trying to sell now. Because essentially, if you cleanse your body for 6 months or whatever, what happens after those 6 months? You know, it's when it comes to stuff like that, it's not about longevity, unfortunately.
Or sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. And aggressive dieting is like something completely different. But when it comes to healing your body, it's not a 6-month quick fix and then it's, you know, reverting back to how you were before and then it's all okay and I'll be fine. It doesn't work like that. So I think that's a massive trap as well that people unfortunately fall into, because in this society that we live in nowadays, it's not really conducive to patience and really riding it out and taking this as a lifetime endeavor. It's more like quick fixes and things that are just gonna fix you in a short space of time, which doesn't actually work.
Yeah, and I call that looking for the silver bullet. And I think that's one of the biggest traps that people fall into, myself included in the beginning. And you're absolutely right. I think that it probably does. It is mostly driven by our capitalistic culture where everybody wants to simplify the problem and then present a solution that they can sell to you in one form or another, whether that's a diet, a pill, a supplement, a protocol. That's one of the biggest things that I start teaching my clients from the get-go is it isn't one thing. It wasn't one thing that got you here. It wasn't, you know, just one specific thing that made you end up with a chronic illness. It was years of multiple things layered on top of each other. We're talking chronic stress, maybe trauma, nervous system regulation stuff, deficiencies. Like it's a big spectrum. And so if we're looking for that singular fix to fix where we are, it doesn't exist. And you can go down that rabbit hole. And I know you know this because you speak about it in your content all the time, that it wasn't about just avoiding gluten. It wasn't about that parasite protocol. It wasn't about finding the perfect supplement, because it's not one thing.
No, exactly.
And if you just stop looking for the one thing, your life gets a lot easier.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of pressure off you, and that amount of energy that you're giving to stress and anxiety, you could actually be putting that back into your body. Why do you think we chase quick fixes even when, you know, we probably know that they're not the answer?
I think it's a multi-dimensional issue. Like we touched on it a little bit about our capitalist type culture that is trying to sell us solutions, and they simplify the problem and they ignore nuance. And I think that's one aspect. But I think when it relates to the healing journey, I think it's also about understanding the difference between a chronic health condition and an acute health situation. So if we go into the doctor's office because we twisted our ankle or had an acute issue all of a sudden happen to us, we are conditioned into that way of, here's the problem, and then the doctor comes in, they diagnose the problem, and they say, oh, here's the solution, you need this. And we're used to that transactional kind of medicine. And for a young person, if that's all you've ever experienced, that certainly was my experience before I received my chronic illness diagnosis. It was, oh, there's a problem with my body. I'll go to the doctor. They'll give me something to fix it. And that's just what we believe. That's just kind of what we're conditioned to believe. And so I think that that's another common mistake, is if we are viewing chronic illness as the same way as an acute condition, it's not the same thing. It's not, oh, just hand me the solution. It doesn't work that way. These are things that have built up over years, if not decades, that require a multifaceted approach to heal.
Yeah. And I know you just touched a little bit on the all or nothing mindset, because I feel like a lot of people think that if they can't do it perfectly, then they might as well not try. And that just ultimately prolongs them starting, right? Why do you think that is? Do you think that's social constructs again, or do you think that's something different?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is. I think if you think about what we're told, when I received my diagnosis of ulcerative colitis, I was told by my doctor, there is no cure. And if I look at that now, knowing what I know through the lens that I've learned, I take that as, we have not figured out a pharmaceutical to fix this problem. That's what there is no cure means, because that's the approach that conventional medicine takes, is diagnose and prescribe for the most part. So if we are told by these people that are in positions of power, like a doctor, someone who is well educated and kind of on a pedestal, tells you there is no cure, I would think that the majority of people take that as, healing is not possible. There's no way to fix this. I'm going to be stuck with this, which can very easily translate to a mindset of, I may as well not even try, because that belief is that this is not going to get better for me. And that's certainly what I believed for a few years, because I didn't know any better until I started walking this path and looking at alternatives and learning. I just kind of recognized that, okay, we're speaking different languages. If a doctor is saying there is no cure, he means there is no pharmaceutical or way to just flick the switch and turn you back to the way you were. But that doesn't mean that healing isn't possible. That doesn't mean that we can't improve our quality of life and get to a place gradually where we feel that we're thriving again. And that's exactly why you and I are here on this podcast, is to amplify that message.
Yeah, and make people aware. It's really interesting because I went to the hospital with my friend the other day, and they were talking about pharmaceutical drugs that she can take. And I mentioned a few natural supplements that she could take as well that have been shown to help the condition. He just completely, didn't even consider it. It was just outright no. Don't bother. But it's like, but there's evidence to show that these natural supplements will help. So why are you pushing pharmaceuticals on her? I went to a different doctor's appointment with my partner who's got serious back problems, and he actually said no to steroid injections and told him to take 8 different natural supplements and prescribed some swimming and things like that. And I just thought, that is the kind of practitioner that I respect. But a lot of people would be like, why has he just told me to do that? He's not helping. That's not going to help me. Well, what a waste of time. That appointment was completely pointless.
And I think that for that reason, this is something that happens, and medical gaslighting is real.
Yeah.
It's absolutely real. And I think that it happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, if we're talking about that kind of hierarchical system that our medical system is built on, especially in older generations, they were very much taught to not question the opinion of your doctor, because this was a person who is highly educated and put up on that pedestal. And so you did not question. You were thankful for those 5 minutes of their time that they gave you. And I think that really needs to change. Not to paint all doctors with the same brush, like you just gave two very different examples of practitioners. And people need to understand that ultimately this is in your hands. This is your choice. The doctor that you choose to work with is your guide. And if you have one leading you down the path of pharmaceutical only and is completely has blinders on to any other options, as we've mentioned before, most pharmaceuticals come with side effects. So what are you signing up for if you follow that practitioner down that path, versus having someone that is maybe a little more open-minded and looks at the alternatives and considers diet and lifestyle changes as part of the program. The path that you're going to go down is potentially completely different. And so that really matters, like who you're choosing to be your guide.
Exactly. And I wish more people put more trust in practitioners who don't go down the standard route of take this, take that, almost pushing medicine onto you, and not actually going through the massive list of side effects that could be really, really harmful to you. And I think that it's not like a purpose-driven trap, but I feel like a lot of people do get trapped in that particular circle because they're just not made aware of the other half of the information that should actually be discussed with them.
Yeah. And I think the first step is understanding that the system, understanding how the system is built. And that's your first step to navigating it. I remember reading this brilliant article years ago that described the difference between allopathic medicine or conventional Western medicine and naturopathic medicine. And the brilliant analogy that they used was, if you look at your body as a house and the symptom shows up in the house. So on the floor in the house, there's a wet spot. And so you call up a professional and say, I've got this wet spot on my floor. Can you come take a look? And the allopathic medicine doctor comes in and says, yeah, that's wet flooritis. And the solution to that is this drug that dries up the dampness on the rug. Okay, great. If you take the same scenario with a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine practitioner, someone that is practicing root cause medicine, they're not just looking at that wet spot on the rug. They're looking at the whole house. They're looking at the complete picture. And maybe they're climbing up onto the roof and then they notice that there's a hole in the roof. And that's where the water's getting in, which is causing that damp spot on the rug. And they use their tools to fix that hole on the roof so that doesn't happen anymore. And I just thought that analogy was brilliant, because if we are not looking at the body as a complete whole system and we're just assessing the symptom, putting a label or diagnosis on it, and then prescribing something to address the symptoms, we're not addressing the complete picture.
Exactly. And I feel like that is a big trap that people fall into, going back to what we were saying at the beginning, thinking that we're failing and not really giving the healing process a chance to really kick in. You're always going to have these hiccups because of the inflamed state that you're currently in, you know. And I think that a lot of people just don't give it the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're still looking at ourselves and our health from that quick fix, all or nothing mentality, and we're expecting to change one thing and then our situation to completely resolve in a very short period of time, that's a huge trap, because then potentially you could take something that is working, that is helping, and dismiss it before it's even had a chance to start working or making an impact in your life.
And I think compassion over control is huge in this situation, and people need to be more kind to essentially the version of who they're trying to be and where they're trying to get to, and be the best version of themselves, and having self-compassion towards that, because you're already being super proactive by starting this journey, and that in itself takes strength. And I don't think people give themselves enough praise, because that is really difficult. You're having to accept that you're not in a good place with your health, and a lot of people love to play ignorant towards it. So yeah, I think self-compassion is huge.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of podcasts on motivation, entrepreneur mindset, and I've listened to so many interviews where people talk about the key to success, if we're relating this to the entrepreneurship journey, and these people who have built these amazingly successful companies, and you ask them what their key to success was, and almost all of them say just not giving up.
Oh yeah.
That in the beginning of the journey, there were no clues to suggest that they would be successful, but they believed they would be, and they just kept going.
Yeah.
And they just kept trusting, and eventually things started to shift for them. And I think that applies to everything, our health included. If you're making one small change and then you're looking for evidence that it's working, and then if you don't find that evidence, you just say, well, I give up, then of course you're never going to get to where you want to be.
That is the difference between motivation and commitment, because motivation is just so unreliable, and it's almost putting your trust in committing to the journey and dedicating yourself to the journey that will eventually lead to results. Because if you stay committed and you stay determined and resilient, which you'll learn along the way, then you will get better. You just have to trust the process. And I think a lot of that is built on focusing on long-term alignment as well, because healing isn't about speed, it's about direction. So with that said, what helped you shift from short-term to long-term thriving?
If I really try to pinpoint it, I think just understanding, learning about how the body works, learning about the healing mechanisms of the body, learning that this really is not a short-term thing, and that I think there was a shift that happened in my mindset where I went from focusing on trying to fix myself to just learning how to support myself. And I guess you could call that the shift between committing to the journey.
Yeah.
Really is what happened. Because when we look at ourselves through that lens of, I need to fix myself or fix these broken parts of me, that is very short-sighted. You're looking for just those quick wins, those quick resolutions, versus understanding that there's probably been a lifetime of dysfunction that has led you to this point, and you're not going to just individually fix all of these issues on their own. It's really about just creating an environment for healing and learning how to support your body and learning what the body really requires to thrive. So even learning about simple things, well, I call them simple things, but they're profound, like learning about our circadian rhythm and learning how our hormones fluctuate throughout the day. That allowed me to learn how to align my activity and my diet with the natural rhythms of my body so that I could achieve better sleep and better energy levels. And so every time that you learn something about how the body works, it gives you an opportunity to look at what you have been doing and go, okay, how can I shift that a little bit? And maybe it's something as simple as committing to an earlier bedtime and trying to go to bed at the same time every day. It's just a simple shift, but it comes with that desire to better support yourself and commit to the long-term process of healing.
Isn't it funny how we learn more during messy times?
Yeah. Well, because we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that desire to relieve that discomfort that causes the growth. That brings up a question that I actually was thinking of asking you. Do you think that we need to hit rock bottom before we truly make change?
I don't think you need to, but I think that most people do. I think change only really happens when you either hit rock bottom or you have a health scare or something pretty catastrophic happens in your life. I think change only really starts to take place when it's basically rammed in your face, which is really unfortunate because I try and teach as a practitioner that, you know, disease prevention is massive. And if you want to live a long, healthy life, then what you do right now really determines how healthy you're going to be later on in life. And I try and drill this into like the people closest to me too, because I want them to live, you know, as long as possible and as healthy as possible too, because being sick sucks. So yeah, I think that people change because they're essentially forced to a lot of the time and they've hit rock bottom. But I really hope that people start to adopt a lifestyle where they don't have to hit rock bottom or have a huge health scare. I really hope that there's going to be like a big shift and a big movement where people start to take longevity seriously and live optimally, not like it to an excessive amount or like be an extremist or anything like that, but, you know, do things in moderation. I think it's really scary as well now because disease is so prevalent in so many people. It's just getting worse and worse and worse as time goes on. And it makes me think a lot of the time, why is this epidemic happening where so many people are getting really, really poorly? And it does boil down to lifestyle and the things that you choose to put in your mouth, movement, sunshine, outside time, how long you're being in nature, like all these things add up.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. And I remember when I first started learning, when I first went back to school, started learning nutrition. And, you know, you're so excited. You're learning all these things. Every week it's something new. And I know that you geek out on nutrition and biology and anatomy and all of that too. And so every time I learned something new, I just wanted to tell everybody. I'm sure I was so annoying to my family members at the time because I'm like, oh, did you know this? And at the same time, I also felt this desire to bring everybody with me. Like you said, like all the people I love, like to save them from themselves, essentially, and be like, I just learned this piece of information. You need to apply it to your life. You know, like, and it's funny now because I don't quite react the same way, although I still get as excited when I learn new things and I want to share them with people and I freely share the information I learn. But ultimately, I recognize that a person's readiness for change is very personal to themselves. And I know that statistically speaking, like you said, most often people are not going to make changes, especially profound changes in how they live their life, unless they have a reason to, unless that discomfort of their current situation outweighs the discomfort of change is kind of the equation that I look at it with. So I recognize that a lot of my excitement can fall on deaf ears if a person is not ready to make those changes. And no amount of excitement in me is going to evoke change in them unless they are ready to start taking those steps. And in that case, if someone reaches out and is like, I'm ready, like, what should I do? I'm like, great, let's get started. But you can't, unfortunately, force anyone to change. You can't just take someone along for the ride with you to save them that discomfort, because everybody's journey is so unique to themselves.
And a lot of the time people don't even realize that they're in an environment that is conducive to making them poorly, so they don't even have that awareness to start with until something bad happens.
Yeah.
And self-reflection isn't really a thing that a lot of people do.
Yeah, making yourself a priority is a huge one, and something that I come across with my clients all the time, because, like I said, I work with a lot of mothers, and I find that the kind of martyrdom syndrome that mothers often have, where they have to put everybody else before themselves, and they end up trying to pour from an empty cup for years, and it just leads to further depletion on all fronts. So it's interesting, because I notice that there's kind of an age group where a lot of women will reach out to work with me, and it's right when their kids are going away to university or leaving the house, when they're getting to that empty nest stage of life, is when they're all of a sudden ready to make changes. And they don't usually even recognize that that's because everybody else has come first for years. That's another thing that you don't have to wait for. You don't have to wait for your kids to move out to start looking after yourself and making yourself a priority, but so many of them do, because they don't recognize that they need to put themselves first.
Even just learning really small little habits or new rituals that they can then implement into their current routine that will benefit them massively is just so overlooked. People find it quite overwhelming, and they think it's huge implementing healthier shifts into their life, when it doesn't have to be that way. It can be actually super simple and really, really effective too. But we're not taught any of this, especially in school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if we were to sum up what we've talked about today, if we were to sum up the main traps that people should try to avoid, what did we say?
So we said about consistency, staying consistent.
Consistency, yeah. Understanding consistency over perfection is huge.
Yeah, all or nothing mindset bunched into that. We spoke about letting go of perfectionism. We spoke about not getting sucked into the trap of, going on a 5-day detox and thinking that it's going to solve all your problems. Just stop looking
for the silver bullet, because it doesn't exist.
Yeah. And just try not to fall in, just don't waste your money, and just try not to fall into the marketing toxic culture that is now, unfortunately, in our faces every day.
Yeah. And then ultimately recognizing that you don't have to wait for rock bottom to make changes. You don't have to wait until your children move out to make changes. You can start with just small, actionable steps, little baby steps.
And, if you're interested in learning about longevity, then reach out, because we don't just work with people that have chronic illness. If you genuinely want to learn more about your body and how it works optimally, then, this is a safe space for you, and you can always reach out and just from, a learning perspective, and start implementing these healthier habits that will essentially allow you to thrive, even if you're not super poorly right now, but you just feel like something isn't quite right.
Yeah, you don't have to wait until you get sick to start thinking about healing or to start learning about longevity. I believe that thriving and living in a way that is in excellent health and extending not only our lifespan, but our health span. I think that's available to everybody. And it can be tricky because there's more people talking about that now than there ever has been. But with that comes a lot of these traps that we discussed today. So you have to kind of do your due diligence and learn not to trust all of the salesmen that are out there trying to sell you some quick fix, detox, diet, whatever it may be.